Yud Gimel Amud Beis. On the bottom. Hahu. Arus v'arusaso da'asu l'kamei d'Rav Yosef. So there was an Arus and an Arusaso who came before Rav Yosef, and there was a little problem, because even though they were Arus and Arusaso, even though they had done Kedushin, they were not yet married, and she came pregnant. So she's pregnant. So they come before Rav Yosef and they're pregnant. They were somebody did something that they weren't supposed to do. He amra minei. She points to him and says, it's his fault. It's from him. V'hu amar, and he said, in minei, you're right. It's from me. So what's the pshat here? So let's just think outside for a second. Well, the reason that we care is because Arus v'arusaso, if she's mizaneh while she had done Kedushin while she's in Arus, and then the kid's a mamzer, if she was warned, obviously here she wasn't warned because we're not sure, but if she was warned, she would get killed, and she would be usher to the Baal as well. So she's an Eishes Ish for all intents and purposes. So over here, she's saying I'm pregnant, and he's saying, it's from me, you're right. They both agree. First thing that they ever agreed on again, but at least here it's in the engagement period. So they both agree that it's from him. They did something that they shouldn't have done, because again, we said they're not allowed to. I actually looked into the question from last week. So for sure, the shtar is different. And Dafka says that the shtar that you're giving for Kedushin is, Dafka shouldn't be confused with the Ksuva. And then we said you could be Mekadosh Nisha with Kesef Shtar or Bia. So we don't do Bia anymore. But seemingly the Bia, this is an interesting thing. Again, assuming we'd have to get into it, but not for now. But assuming that the Bia is from the Kiddushin, the Gemara is not assuming that she's pregnant because of the Bia that they did in order to be Mekadosh her. But you do a Shtar for Kiddushin, you do a Kesef, or you do Bia. But again, we don't do Bia. So this woman who's coming, we don't assume that she was pregnant from the Bia that they did when they did the Kiddushin. We assume that she was Aras. She's clearly been Aras for 6 months. She's only 3 months pregnant. So everybody knows that she was Aras she was pregnant during the Aras period. The question is, who's it from? So if it's from the guy, then it's not the knife thing, but it's not the end of the world. That's it. You did something you're not supposed to do, but there's no mamzeros. She's still mutter to him, etc. They could still get married. They're just living together before they're married. But if it's from somebody else, then it's a problem. So we don't know who this baby's from. However, the difference here is that not only do we have her saying that kosher nivalti, again, going back to yesterday's case, where she goes in and she has bia with somebody, and we're just not sure if she had bia with somebody that was kosher l'kahuna or not, and we had the machlokes Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua, ne'emenes or ein ne'emenes. So we have a similar question here. We know that she had bia. We don't know who she had bia with. So do we assume, like Rabbi Gamliel and ne'emenes, that she's believed that she had bia with her soon-to-be husband? Or do we have to say ein ne'emenes, that we don't believe her, and we have to assume she had bia with her somebody who's not her husband or going to be her husband? Now she's going to be usher to the Baal, the kid's going to be a mamzer, etc., etc. So Rav Yosef l'may neichoshla. Why should we believe her? First of all, the fact that he's agreeing in this case is going to give us even more of a reason to believe her. One can argue that he's no Gea B'davar, but one can also argue he's not no Gea B'davar. It doesn't really affect him because he can just go on and marry somebody else anyway. But the first reason that we would maybe believe her, again, even if we wouldn't believe her in the regular case where she has bia where somebody comes out of the room and we'd say, was he kosher l'kahuna, was he not? So Rabbi Shua says, ein ne'emenes, and Rabbi Gamliel says, ne'emenes. So first of all, here we also have the husband who's agreeing that it was from him. Ve'od ha'amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel halachak Rabbi Gamliel. And second of all, regardless, the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, who says that if a woman in a regular case says l'kasher nivalti, so we believe her. So over here where she says, even if the husband wasn't here, if she says it was from my husband or my soon-to-be husband, then we're going to believe her. Amar le Abaye ubahaki lo modeh mechsher Rabbi Gamliel. So Abaye asks, is it true that in the case, I agree with you, if the husband admits that it's from me, then we're going to agree and we're going to let them stay together and we're going to let the kid be not a mamzer. But is it true that according to Rabbi Gamliel, who says ne'emenes, in a regular case where she comes out and she says, l'kasher nivalti, I had beer with a kosher guy, I'm still kosher l'kahuna. Is it true that we're going to believe this woman even if the guy didn't admit? But we know that Shmuel said, Shinana, you sharp one, halacha Gamliel. The halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. However, you can't do so ad de'ika rov ksherin etzla. Yesterday we brought in the svara that we thought, according to both of them, if you say ne'emenes or you say ein ne'emenes, and ne'emenes is even if rov psulin etzla. We said ein ne'emenes is rov even if it's rov ksherin etzla. But over here Shmuel is bringing in the fact that he holds that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. We believe a woman in general when she said who she had bia with. However, that's only with rov ksherin etzla. So in the case yesterday, as long as it wasn't in the midbara, for instance, if it was in the masa, so we would say rov ksherin etzla, and we're going to assume that she was nival to somebody that's kosher. But what about this case? Well, over here, what's the rov? Rov of the people are puzzle to her because she's only allowed to be with this guy. The rest of the world is going to be puzzle to her. So in this case, he's arguing and saying we wouldn't believe her even when he comes along and says, even though over here it seems like if he's saying, right, because he's asking the question, uvaha kilo mode, when the husband doesn't admit. It sounds like he agrees, Shmuel, that when the husband admits, we're going to believe her even when rov psulin etzla. But in the case where the husband's not saying anything, So we're going to say the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel in general. Ne'emenes, we believe her, but in a case where it's rov psul netzla, the rest of the world here would be puzzled to her. So we're actually not going to believe her. And you said that we believe her. Well, the tamecha tikshi lachi yufa. Yeah, but we have a kasha to you because even according to you, what Shmuel is saying seems to be contradicting himself. What did he say? Halacha Rabbi Gamliel. But you shouldn't do it until rov ksher netzla. What does that mean? Halacha ve'alo tavidov da elamayis chalameimar. So he comes out. No. Here's what the svara is according to Shmuel. Again, without Shmuel, we said halacha like Rabbi Gamliel, and she's ne'emenes across the board, whether rov ksher netzla or not rov ksher netzla, which includes this case because rov psul netzla over here. However, according to even within Shmuel, we say elamayis chalameimar. What are you going to say? Halichatchila hadiyavad. If you want to make the difference between rov ksherim etzla and not rov ksherim etzla, that's only, even if you want to make that nafkamina, that's only b'diavad and lechatchila. That means lechatchila, if you have a woman who comes out and rov or ksherim etzla, so then lechatchila, we're going to say she can go ahead and marry a kohen. However, if rov psulim etzla, then we're going to say lechatchila, you can't go ahead and marry a kohen. However, b'diavad, if she goes ahead and marries a kohen anyway, since halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that ne'emenes, even though we say if rov psul netzla lechatchila, she shouldn't go ahead and marry a kohen. B'diavad, if she marries a kohen, even in a case where rov ksherim, where rov are psulim etzla, if you learn like Shmuel, then you're still going to say that she could stay married. And therefore, even if you want to argue like Shmuel, again, if you don't say like Shmuel, then this woman is believed regardless of what her husband says. Rabbi Gamliel says ne'emenes, this woman is believed to say, I am pregnant from my husband. But even if you want to learn like Shmuel, that in general, in a case where rov ksherim etzla, it's okay, but rov psul etzla, it's not okay. That's only lechatchila. In this case, it's clearly a case of b'diavad. They're coming after the fact and saying, I'm already pregnant. So even Shmuel is going to agree that b'diavad, even though rov psul etzla, in a case of b'diavad, where she's coming and she's pregnant, and after the fact, we're going to say she maybe shouldn't have, stayed with the guy, shouldn't have been with this guy. But now you have a pregnant woman who has a arus, somebody that she's engaged to. So b'diavad, we're going to say you could stay together with her, even if you taina like Shmuel that says that in the case of rov psul etzla, which this case is lechatchila, you shouldn't go ahead. But again, by definition, this case is only b'diavad. Rami le Abai le Rava. Now we're going to go in another direction. Now we're going to go within Rabbi Yeshua, which again, yesterday we said Rabbi Yeshua is the one who holds that when a woman comes out and she's pregnant, then we don't believe her. She loses her chazaka. Again, according to Rabbi Gamliel, she has a cheskas kashrus l'kahuna. So when she comes out and we don't know who she came out and who she had bia with, we're going to still say that she's going to be kashrus l'kahuna because she has a cheskas kashrus l'kahuna. And even though she did some naughty behavior, we assume that it was with a kosher guy. But over here, Rabbi Yeshua says no. If she comes out and she had bia, so then ain't an emenes, because once she went ahead and had bia with somebody, she loses her cheskas kashrus, and we have to assume that the guy is a psul, seemingly even if rov ksherin etzla. That's like we said yesterday. But now Rami le Abai le Rava miyamar Yeshua ain't an emenes. We have a separate case where Rabbi Yeshua seems to say that we do believe a woman when she says that she had bia with a kosher guy. What's that case? Or minhu heid Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir al amanas isa she ksher lekahuna. Rabbi Yeshua was made in a case of an amanas isa, the amana of dough, doesn't mean amana dough, the amana of doubt. Shehi ksher lekuna. She's kosher lekuna. So let's say this outside for a second, because there's a long Rashi which we're not going to understand. So let's say that outside. The background is Kohen marries a woman who's usher to him. Kohen marries a divorcee. What's the product? What's the kid? Halal. Good. Halal can marry who? Anyone. If a halal marries a woman, then she is now asur kahuna. So halal can marry anybody that he wants. He could have bia seemingly with anybody he wants. However, anybody that he has bia with, by definition, that she had bia with a halal, now she's going to be asur kahuna. Fine. Gets a little bit complicated. Here's the case. A man is married to a woman. Regular people. He throws a get at her. Problem is, it lands in the middle. And we don't know if it landed closer to him or closer to her. If it lands closer to him, they're not divorced. If it lands closer to her, then they're divorced. The man dies, so now you have a woman. We're not clear if she's a widow or a divorcee. If she's a widow, she can marry a Kohen. If she's a divorcee, she can't marry a Kohen. This woman who the get was thrown at now goes ahead and marries a Kohen. What's the status of the kid?
Halal.
Safek halal. Maybe she was a divorcee, but maybe she was a widow. Safek halal. That's the status of the kid. What happens if this Safek halal goes ahead and gets married? So this Safek halal gets married to a woman, has bia with a woman, and then dies. Can this woman now marry a Kohen? Well, again, if he's a halal, then a halal has bia, can't marry a Kohen. So we're going to see it's not necessarily a sfeik. According to one opinion it is, but it's still the same suffix. The same suffix is whether the get landed there or landed there. It's the same suffix. But again, we're going to see in the Gemara, interesting, whether it's a sfeik or maybe it's a sfeik, maybe it's just one suffix, where the get landed, and happens to just go down through the generations. So over here, now you have this woman who had bia with a suffix halal, amanas isa. So we're calling it she was married to this guy who was a safek halal, because at the end of the day, his mother might have been a divorcee and might have been a widow. So this man who's a safek halal married this woman, and now he dies. So now this woman might have had bia, might have been married to a halal, and might have been married to a non-halal. So the question is, this woman is the same exact thing that we had yesterday. This woman now is safek whether she's kosher l'kahuna or not. So it's a few generations and it's a few details and more complicated. But Lamaisa, at the end of the day, you have a woman now who might be mutter to a Kohen and might not be mutter to a Kohen. Now we don't know. Seemingly it's the same as yesterday, where this woman comes out of the room after having bia. And the question is, did she have bia with a kosher l'kahuna or a not kosher l'kahuna? Is she mutter to a Kohen or is she not mutter to a Kohen? So the Amanas Isa, seemingly you would think that whatever they said yesterday, if Rabbi Gamliel says ne'emenes that woman, then ne'emenes this woman. If you say not ne'emenes that woman, like Rabbi Yeshua says, then you would say in this case not ne'emenes. That's why the Gemara is asking this kasha, because what does Rabbi Yeshua say in this case? That we believe her, and she is considered to be mutter l'kahuna. That's the kasha of the Gemara. Or mini, hey Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira alamanas isa she kasher l'kahuna. But yesterday, Rabbi Yeshua is the same guy who said that a woman comes out from having bia, and we're not sure, safek, whether it was a kohen, whether it was a kosher l'kahuna or not kosher l'kahuna, she's going to be asur l'kahuna. Why? Because she lost her chazaka of kosher l'kahuna by going ahead. So what's the difference here? Says the Gemara, Amar le hachi hashta hasam isha nises bodekes v'nises hacha isha mizana bodekes v'mizana. No, I'll answer to you according to Rabbi Yeshua why there's a difference. According to Rabbi Yeshua, the difference is that over here, when a woman is going to get married, this woman who married this safek halal did her research beforehand, and she found out whether he was a halal or not. And by definition, when she married him, she knew that he wasn't a halal. She went back to the scene of the crime or the scene of the get, and she saw exactly where it landed, and she knew that in fact the mother was not divorced, and it was never divorced, therefore she was a widow, therefore this man is not a halal, and therefore when she married him, that's why we're going to believe her, and she's going to be kosher l'kahuna. We're going to see in a second that that's a little bit crazy, because we have Bari Veshema. That, what do you mean? She doesn't know for sure. But we'll see in a second. Hacha isha mezana b'dekas mezana. The reason that I told you when the woman comes out of the room and she had bia with the guy that she's going to be pasal l'kahuna is because we can't assume, if she's going into a room with a guy and having bia with him, then we can't assume that she's going to check out and make sure that he's a certain type of guy that she wants to be with. She's willing to have bia with anybody. So we're not going to believe her in that case. But in this case, she's going to do her research before she goes ahead and goes with and marries a halal. Hacha isha bodekes umezana. Is she really going to check? And that's why Rabbi Yeshua says differently. Amar Rava. To Rabbi Yeshua kasha. Just like you asked a kasha on Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Yeshua, which you just answered. To Rabbi Gamliel, lo kasha. But you have a kasha on Rabbi Gamliel as well. Why? Because if you go weiter in this same brisa where you said almanas isa, which is ksher l'kahuna le Rabbi Yeshua, you have the opposite. And you'll see in the sefer that Rabbi Gamliel actually holds that this almanas isa is going to be asur l'kahuna. And you would have thought that Rabbi Gamliel would hold that she would be kosher l'kahuna, just like the lady yesterday who comes out of the room is going to be kosher l'kahuna. Again, it's not 100% clear from the Gemara, as we'll see in a second, how Rabbi Gamliel is saying that she's pasal l'kahuna, but the Gemara is understanding that his statement is pasal l'kahuna. Let's see. Amar l'hen Rabbi Gamliel. Kibanu eiduschem. We hear what you're saying, man. We hear Rabbi Yeshua what you're saying. Aval manas, what can we do? Sharei gazer Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shelo lahoshe beizin al kach. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a gzera that we're not going to convene a beizin to decide what the status of this almana is, whether she is allowed to marry a kohen or not. Why? Shakonim shom lehem l'rachek avalo l'karv. Because kohanim only listen to make them aser. They want to be machmer, but not l'karv, but not to make them mutter. And therefore, kohanim are not going to listen to the psak anyway, even if we say that this savei halal is mutter l'kahuna, and therefore we're not even going to get together. And what are we going to have to do by definition? Seemingly, we're going to have to make her aser l'kahuna. But at the end of the day, what do you see? You see that Rabbi Gamliel says that she's aser l'kahuna for this woman who might have been married to a halal, might not have been married. So she may be asur l'kahuna, maybe mutter l'kahuna. Yesterday, the same woman, or a different woman, hopefully, or maybe the same woman, the woman over here yesterday, she came out, she's safek, allowed to be kahuna or not, and yesterday Rabbi Gamliel says ne'emenes, and over here Rabbi Gamliel is saying ain't ne'emenes. So the Gemara says an interesting answer. Ela Amarava to Rabbi Gamliel lo kasha hasam bari hachashema. Rabbi Gamliel is not a kasha. Why? Because yesterday was bari. Rabbi Gamliel says ne'emenes, we believe her when she's bari. When she says, I am bari, I came out of that room, yes, I had bia, I did something I wasn't supposed to do, but I know for sure that guy is making me still kasha l'kahuna. Over here, I'm shema. Over here, I'm not sure. Over here, he's a savek halal. What did the Rishonim point out? Clearly, this answer is not going with the answer we just gave, because the answer we just gave is what? She's going to check him out. If she's going to check him out, then she's bari. So the answer is saying no. This is assuming now, not like we said before, that she's checking him out. She's not checking him out. There's really no way to go back to the scene of the accident. After all, it's a few years later, makes sense, or a few generations later, and you can't check the records. There's no Facebook, there's no nothing. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel makes sense. Rabbi Gamliel says, yesterday with this woman who came out of the room, she did something she shouldn't have done, but Lamaisa, she's bari, she's coming to us and saying, I am certain that the guy that I was with, come on, I know that I'm not the best girl in the world, but I'm not just going to be with anybody. I'm going to be with a guy that's going to keep me kosher l'kahuna. Over here, this woman, she says, I have no idea. There's no way for me to know. Shema, you're right. Shema, I'm going to be mutter to Kohen, but Shema, I'm not. Because at the end of the day, it's impossible for me to know whether, in fact, the grandfather, in this case, threw the get closer to him or closer to my grandmother. So at the end of the day, it understands why over there Rabbi Gamliel is going to say Nemenes, but over here Rabbi Gamliel is going to say in Nemenes because again he cares about Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif. De Rabbi Yeshua Nami Lo Kashya. Rabbi Yeshua is also not a Kasha. Now again, why can't we answer the same thing we answered before? Right? What did we answer before for Rabbi Yeshua? We said over here over there she's going to check it out before she gets married. And in the case of the Mishnah yesterday, she's not going to check it out. She's going to be Mizana. So again, we can't say the same thing here. She's going to check it out before she gets married to this guy. Why? Because there's no way for her to check it out. Because we're going within the answer that it's Shema, there's no way for her to check it out. So now, Rabbi Yeshua, why yesterday did Rabbi Yeshua say that this woman is going to be Asher L'Kahuna, but in this case, the woman is going to be Mutter L'Kahuna? If anything, Rabbi Gamliel makes a lot of sense. Yesterday was Bari, today was Shema. Therefore, like the Bari, you should be in Nemenes, and the Shema, you shouldn't be in Nemenes. Fakir, he's saying the opposite, Rabbi Yeshua. He's saying over here that we're believing the Shema, and we're not believing the Bari. So what's the pshat? Rabbi Yeshua Nami Lokashya Hasam Chat Sveika Hachi Trei Sveika. And I apologize in advance. I can't get into the Trei Sveika thing because Tosfos has a kasha on Rashi the way they were learning the whole Gemara and says it's not really two Sveika, but we'll say it outside quickly. So Rabbi Yeshua says no, I don't care about Bari V'Shema. As the Gemara will say in a second. Shema, I don't care, and I'm willing to say that a woman is going to be in Nemenes even when she's Shema. The only thing I care about is one suffix or two sfekos. When there's one suffix, then I'm going to say we don't believe her. So yesterday she may have been bari, but there was only one suffix. Was the guy a guy who's going to make her kosher l'kahuna or a guy that's going to make her pasal l'kahuna? So even though she's bari, I know that he was kosher l'kahuna. It doesn't matter. One suffix, we got to be machmir. Suffix l'chumra. Over here today, why are you telling me? So Rabbi Gamliel says we don't believe her today because in this case she's only a shema. I don't care that she's only a shema in this case. Over here it's a sveka. Again, unclear exactly what the svek is. It seems to me, and it seems to Tosfos, that the suffix is only one suffix. Lamaisa, where did the get land? Did it land here or did it land there? The Rashi seems to be learning it's a sveka because her mother had a suffix, and then she has a suffix as well. Again, Tosfos doesn't like that pshat, but let's just stick with that for a second. So Rabbi Yeshua says, this case is a case of sveka. Therefore, in a case of sveka, even though she's a shema, we don't care about bari v'shema, we care about sveka. So sveka, we're going to believe her in this case. In that case, yesterday, where it was a suffix, even though she was bari, we're not going to believe her. And that's how the Gemara spells it out. All the Rabbi Gamliel cares about Sveika, and even though yesterday's case, where she was bari, as long as she's bari, even if it's only one suffix, was it a good guy, was it not a good guy, we're going to believe her, because bari is all we care about. And today, we're not going to believe her, even though it's a sveka, we're not going to believe her because Lamaisa she's shema, and all we care about is bari and shema. And Rabbi Yeshua is the opposite. Rabbi Yeshua alim lechat sveka. All we care about is chat sveka, and therefore in yesterday's case it was chat sveka afilu b'bari nami pasol. Even though she's a bari, we're going to say pasol because it's chat sveka. And today, the kilei sveik sveika dafilu b'shema nami machshir. And today, since we have a sveik sveika, even though it's a shema case, and there's no way for her to know whether, in fact, the get landed here or there, since it's a sveik sveika, since it's two suffix, we care more about sveik sveika. So again, that's how the two sides work out. Glad, beautiful. Tana Rabbanan. Now the Rabbanan are going to say, Ezohi Amanas Isa. Now again, they're not going to explain. We already explained what the case of the Amanas Isa is. We explained that it's this woman who was married to a Safek Halal. Can she marry a Kohen? But the question is, does this include all Sfekas? What does that mean? Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzerus, v'lo mishum nesinus, v'lo mishum avdei malachim. So Tanakama seems to be saying at first glance, and we're going to get into it in the Gemara, the Tanakama seems to be saying that when we say that this woman, again, seemingly this woman, according to Rabbi Yoshua, can go ahead and marry the kahuna, right? According to Rabbi Gamliel, she can't. But according to Rabbi Yeshua, she can go ahead and marry the kahuna. So, Ezu Amanas Isa. Who is this person that's allowed to go ahead and marry the kahuna? Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzerus, v'lo mishum nesinus, v'lo mishum avdei malachim. So it seems to be saying here that we only allow this woman who was married to a Safek Halal to go ahead and marry a Kohen. But if she was married to a Safek Mamzer, a Safek Nasin, a Safek Eved, then we're not going to go ahead and let her marry a Kohen. So we have to assume that by the Mamzer, if he was a Safek Mamzer, Nasin, or Eved, we have to assume he was in fact a Mamzer, and therefore if she's married to him, she's Asur L'Kahuna. But if he was a Safek Halal, then we can assume that he wasn't a Halal, and therefore she can go ahead and she can marry a Kohen. And we'll have to see exactly what the difference is that the Gemara is going to point out on Amud Beis. All of these cases are biblical cases. A halal is a biblical case, and a mamzer is a biblical case. If you marry a mamzer, so then you're usher to a kohen biblically. If you marry a halal, you're usher to a kohen biblically as well. So why should it be? If it's safek d'oraisa l'chumra, then why, if you marry a safek halal, should you be mutter to go ahead and marry a kohen? But the Gemara, the Tanakam, is saying that by a safek halal, according to Rabbi Yeshua, she can go ahead and she can marry. She was married to the safek halal. If she was married to a safek mamzer, safek nasin, safek eved, in that case we got to be machmir, and she cannot go ahead and marry a kohen. Amar Rabbi Meir says, Shamati, I hear you and I double. Kol she'ein ba echad mikol elu masin lekahuna. Anybody who doesn't have any of these, you can marry a kahuna. What's the problem with him? He says exactly what the Tanakama just said. If they don't have one of these, if it's not a mamzer, nasin, safek mamzer, nasin, or eved, then you can go ahead and you can marry a kahuna. So the Gemara is going to say, what are you talking about, man? He just said the same exact thing. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Meir, v'chein Aryai, Rabbi Shimon ben Asim, Merkid v'Rav, ezu amanat tzitza, kol she'nidma ba safek halal. Again, what are we saying? Same exact thing. Anybody that has a Safek Halal? We just have three people who said the same exact thing. Except the third person adds something interesting. Makirin Yisrael Mamzerin Shebenehem. Everyone recognizes the Mamzerin Benehem. You go to a Shabbos table, if the guy's a Mamzer, everyone's going to know about it. That's what they're talking about at the Shabbos table. This guy's a Mamzer. Fine. However, Ein Makirin Halal and Shebenehem. If a guy's a Halal, nobody wants to talk about it at the Shabbos table. That's not such an interesting topic. So the guy's a Mamzer, the whole world's going to know about it. All of the Jews are going to know about it. The guy's a Halal, people are not going to bother, they're not going to talk about it so much. We'll see in a second why that's so. So that's what he adds. But seemingly, number one and number two, the Tanakam and Rabbi Meir are saying the same exact thing, so we have to figure out what number two is adding. And number three seems to be saying the same exact thing, except he's adding something that seems to be not relevant, that we all know Mamzerim, but we don't all know Halalim. Let's see what the Gemara is talking about. Amar Mar. This is the Tanakama. Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzeris lo mishum nesinus lo mishum abdei malachim. Again, when we say it's kosher for this woman to marry a Kohen, that's only if she was married to a Safek Halal. If she was married to a Safek Amana, Safek Nasin, Safek Eved, she's not allowed to. Ha Halal, what does that imply? That if she was married to a Safek Halal, kosher, she's kosher l'kahuna. Maishna hanach d'oraisa halal nami d'oraisa. The question that I asked outside, what's the difference between a Halal in those cases? If she's married to a Halal Vadai, then she's also to a Kohen. Therefore, if she's married to a Mamzer Vadai, she's also to a Kohen. So why in the case of Safek Mamzer, we're going to say she's also to a Kohen, and in the case of Safek Halal, she's going to be mutter to a Kohen. Visu, furthermore, that's the first question. Visu, Amar Rabbi Meir, Shamati Kol She'ein Ba'echad Mikol Elu Masin L'Kuna. Hainu Tanakama. Come on, man. You're saying the same exact thing as the Tanakama is saying. Visu, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Meir, v'chein Rabbi Shimon ben Asim, Rabbi Kivarav. Ezu Yalman Tzisa Kol She'nimah Ba'Savei Chalal, Makirin Yisrael Mamzerim Shebenehem, Makirin Chalalin Shebenehem. What does that imply? If you say that everybody knows Mamzerim, but not everybody knows Chalalim, that implies that what? Ha'amar Reisha Chalal Kosher. That implies everyone doesn't know Chalalim, and therefore the Chalalim need to be puzzled. But we just saw that Chalalim are kosher if you're married to a Safek Halal. So we have three different questions. We have the question of why exactly would a Safek Halal be different than a Safek Mamzer? Second question is, what is number two guy adding to number one guy? And number three seems to be saying that we know everybody hawks about Mamzerim. That implies what? That implies that everybody knows about a mamzer, and therefore maybe a Safek mamzer should be mutter, as we'll see in a second. But not everybody knows about halal, and therefore maybe a halal should be aser, Safek halal. But we just said in the beginning that a Safek halal is mutter. So how do we answer all this? So it's like a beautiful drasha. You have three questions and you give one answer, and everybody's happy. V'amar reisha halal kosher. Amar b'yochanan? No. What's the case in the Mishnah? Mamzer tzoveach. I go over to you and I say mamzer, and you start yelling and screaming. I'm not a mamzer. I'm not a mamzer. V'chalal shosei gika b'nai. Then I say, shh. You're a halal, and you don't say a word. So you have a guy who we call a mamzer, you call him a halal, either one guy, two guys, but let's say one guy, you call him a mamzer, he starts yelling, you call him a halal, he doesn't say a word. That's the difference, and that's what the case in the Mishnah is. Let's see what the pshat is. Tanakama Savar. What's the Tanakama talking about? Kol psul de karilo v'shasik pasol. No. Tanakama says, anybody who you call a psul and they're quiet is pasol, even what? Even a halal. If I go over to a guy and I say, you're a halal and you're quiet, we assume you're halal. Shtika keoda. That's what the Tanakama holds, and that reads into the Gemara. Again, what did the Mishnah? Let's just read it into the Gemara. What did the Gemara say on the bottom of Yudal and Aleph? The Gemara said, "Ezu amanatisa kol she'ein ba lo mishum amzeris v'lo mishum nesinis v'lo mishum avdei malachim." Rashi adds, where do you see halal there? So he said you don't have to mention halal. It's an interesting pshat. You don't have to mention halal. These are all deoraisas, like your question was, and halal is the same. So that answers question number one. That halal enechanami is the same exact thing, and we're not talking about safek halal here at all. We're talking about just a pshat that if you have a guy and you go over to them, ein ba lo mishum amzeris, lo mishum nesinis, lo mishum avdei malachim. Same thing with a halal. You call somebody a halal. If he doesn't say a word, we consider him to be a halal. Fine. Says the Gemara, what does the next guy say? So that answers the first question. Second question is, what's the number two guy adding when he says Shamati kol she'ein ba'echad mikolei l'masin l'kuhuna? V'kamer le Rabbi Meir, no. Hana chudika pasule bekahal. He argues, and he says, no. I understand that if I go over to somebody and I call him a mamzer and he doesn't answer, I call him a nasan and he doesn't answer, I call him an eved and he doesn't answer, shtika koda. I agree with you. However, that's only those. But if you go over to somebody and you call them a halal and he doesn't answer, he's still kosher. He's not considered to be a halal. Now, for practical purposes, as we'll see, it doesn't really make a difference, right? What do we say? A halal, if he's a halal, he can still marry any woman that he wants. Just a matter of what the status of what? What the status of the kid are going to be, and what the status of this woman is going to be after he's no longer married to her. But if you go over to a halal, and you say you're a halal and the guy's quiet, then the second opinion in the thing, as opposed to the first opinion which says shtika koda, the second opinion says no, he's going to be kosher. Then why is he being quiet? Why don't we say shtika koda? V'hadishasig mishum delo ichbalei. He's quiet because he has no reason to waste his voice and talk back to you. It doesn't affect him really. It doesn't affect him. He's a halal. He can marry anybody he wants anyway. His kids, okay, he doesn't care about his kids so much, seemingly. But halal, what's he going to answer? So you can't prove that he's a halal, the fact that he doesn't say anything, because the ma'aseh halal is a halal, and it doesn't affect him if you call him a halal. Call me anything you want. Don't call me a mamzer. You don't call me a nasan, you don't call me an eved. Call me a halal all you want. What do I care? It's not going to affect me at all.
It's not the exact status as he does, halal.
If a halal marries, I'm assuming that they would be asur l'kuhuna as well. I'm assuming, yeah.
The wives.
No, but I'm assuming that the kids would also be halalim. Yeah. But again, the point is that it doesn't really affect him so much. He can still marry anybody that he wants. So that's why he's quiet. So we don't assume that when he's quiet, we don't assume shtika koda, we assume that he's quiet because he doesn't necessarily care.
Based on this,
wouldn't he care?
I'm sorry.
Wouldn't he care because he's missing out on opportunities for a kohen?
Again, he doesn't care. He can marry anybody he wants.
You're just only in that regard, but I'm just
saying the halal can marry anybody he wants.
I know, but
he doesn't care about anybody but himself. He doesn't care about whose kids are going to be able to marry. He doesn't care about it.
But wouldn't he be concerned that he wouldn't be able to do avoda or
Oh, so that's interesting. The Gemara is going to give another answer, so we'll see. But interesting. It sounds like, according to this answer, the Gemara, it's not worth his time to even answer you. Call him a halal, good. Doesn't really affect me too much, or enough that I'm going to care about it. So that's what the second opinion says. So again, now the second opinion is not the same. First opinion said they're all on the same level. Second opinion says no, a halal. Now the third opinion is going to say no. The halal, when he's shasuk, we believe. When the mamzer is shasuk, that's when we don't believe him. Interesting. Why? If you're going to tell me that we're going to say shtika keoda, lo dekaru le chalav. Again, what did the third guy say? He's the one who said makirin yisrael mamzerim shebeneim. We all hawk about mamzerim, but we don't hawk about halalim. So now it's going to be interesting. I'll just say it outside for a second. Now it makes sense. If I call you a mamzer, so why would you bother saying anything? If you're really a mamzer, everybody's going to know about it. So if you're quiet, it doesn't prove that you're a mamzer. You're saying, why should I waste my voice? Why do I have to... You're a little Joe Schmo who's calling me a mamzer. If I was really a mamzer, the whole world would know about it. So you're calling me a mamzer, I don't care what you're saying. Shtika's not koda. I'm basically saying no. If you're calling me a halal, then since everybody doesn't know about it, I want to defend myself for probably the reasons you're saying. I don't want to be known as a halal to the whole world. You call me a halal and whatever, fine. But if you call me a halal and I'm quiet and I don't yell up and I scream, then all of a sudden everybody's going to start hawking at the Shabbos table that I'm a halal. Again, how does it really affect me? I still don't want to be known as a halal. According, again, this is a different answer. So you could say that the two answers argue. That the first guy saying, no, the guy doesn't care about being a halal. It doesn't affect him, therefore shtika koda. According to this answer, the guy does care about it. He doesn't want to be known in the world as a halal. And right now nobody knows him because nobody hawks about halalim. But if you go over to him and call him a halal and he's quiet, then that person who called him a halal is going to post it on Facebook. Next thing you know, the whole world's going to know that he's a halal. So this is like a fascinating, this is the exact reverse svara. There's others for where shtika koda, mamzer is quiet. Okay, he's quiet. He's obviously a mamzer. Over here, it's no. Dafka, the mamzer is quiet because he has no reason to talk. Because if he was really a mamzer, then everybody would know about it. If nobody knows about it and you're calling him a mamzer, he has no reason to waste his breath on you. It's a waste. If he was really a mamzer, everybody would know about it. Gotta love when the Gemara does this. Okay. If you're going to tell me that one person is going to be considered shtigo koda, lo dekarule chalal v'shasik, elo dekarule mamzer v'shasik. Only shtigo koda by a chalal, but by a mamzer v'shasik, we're not going to assume that he's shtigo koda. Why? V'hay d'shasik savar mamzer kol islay. I have a coal. Everybody will know about it. And if you're going to go ahead and you're going to call me a mamzer, I'm just going to sit quiet because there's no reason for me to think. Aval mamzer v'tzaveach. If he starts getting all defensive, he has no reason to be defending himself. If he starts defending himself, then we assume that he's clearly lying. He's clearly insecure with himself. And therefore we assume he's a mamzer. Chalal v'shosek pasul. If a chalal is shosek, he's pasul. Again, if a chalal would be yelling, then we would believe him. Because again, you're calling him a chalal, and I'm saying I'm not a chalal. But a chalal who's shosek, well, we assume he's a chalal. Why? V'hayda ishtik savar misei de lo mafkile mikach. Because we have to assume the worst, that the reason he's being quiet is because he doesn't want the whole world to go ahead and know that he is. Oh, so I explained it a little bit differently. So he's saying over here about, by a chalal, we assume that the guy, we have to assume that when you call him a halal, that he's not saying anything and he's really a halal, and he's not going to get up and yell, because if he's going to get up and yell, then we're going to go do research on his whole past. And he doesn't want to be known as a certain halal. He'd rather be known as somebody who's a suffix halal, somebody that one person called a halal. Look at Rashi over there. It's 4 lines on the bottom. Rabbi Meir, Atanakama, the EU called pasul, the shasik be pasul, Rabbi Meir halal shasaku de pasul, the savar, mistaydelo mifgale me mikahal. V'manit saveach yerchrizo lai v'yodei psule beberer. V'achshav ein makirin yisrael halal and shabeneim. V'shasik mamzer, etc. So it seems to be a little bit different than I said. He's saying that if I call you a halal, so if you yell, then we believe you. Because then you're taking a chance, because once you start yelling, they're going to start checking into you and making sure that you're really not a halal. But if you're quiet, then we don't believe you, because we have to assume that you're really a halal. And the reason that you're being quiet is because you don't want to know for certain that you're a halal, because if you would start yelling, then we would check into your whole history. Again, it's always hard to understand both svaras. Once you have like the svara from the first guy, it's hard to understand the svara. But it's Lamaisa, it comes out that according to Tanakama, suffix anything, according to Tanakama, if you call a guy a halal, a mamzer, anything, and he's shasik, so then we're going to assume that he's a mamzer, he's a halal, shtika koda. According to the second opinion, we're going to say that only works by a mamzer. If the guy is quiet, then he's admitting he's a mamzer. If he's a halal, we don't assume he's a halal. We're assuming that he's quiet because Lamaisi has nothing to gain by speaking out. Now again, obviously the third one's not going to go exactly with that svara. The third one says the opposite. The third one says if you call a guy a mamzer and he's quiet, we assume he's not a mamzer. Because Lamaisa, he has no reason to talk out, because if he's a mamzer, then everybody would know about it. If you call a guy a halal and he's quiet, we have to assume he's a halal. Why is he not speaking up? He's not speaking up because he'd rather be known as a guy who's a suffix halal. You're calling him a halal, so now we say, okay, maybe he's a halal. We have to assume maybe he's a halal. But he's not yelling up, because if he would yell up, then we'd really do all of our history. We'd go a background check, and we don't want to do he doesn't want to do a background check, so he'd rather just be quiet and be known as a suffix halal, which again affects him even less than if he was a regular halal. Now it's a suffix halal, and now you have this case where if a suffix halal would marry a girl, maybe even the girl would still be mutter to the Kohen now. So Savei Halal, he's not going to say anything, because if he was Soveach, so we have to assume that by the fact that he's quiet, he's admitting that maybe he's a halal. Because if he was confident that he's not a halal, then he would speak up and say, okay, do a background check. The fact that he's not letting us do a background check is showing that he might actually be a Savei Halal. Tani Chada, we'll end with this. Rabbi Yossi Omer Shasuk Mamzer Kasher Shasuk Halal Pasal, V'Tani Ida Shasuk Halal Kasher Shasuk Mamzer Pasal. So we have a kasha. We have 2 contradicting brises. One said that when a mamzer shasuk is kasher, when a halal shasuk is pasal. Other one says when a halal shasuk is kasher, when a mamzer shasuk is pasal. What's the obvious answer? This is the second guy in the Mishnah, and this is the third guy in the Mishnah, right? They were arguing. So, no kasha. Ha Tanakama liba de Rabbi Meir. Tanakama liba de Rabbi Meir is the one who said that a mamzer who's shasuk is going to be pasal, and a halal shatzak is going to be kasher. The Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Ali ben Rabbi Meir, he holds that if the halal is quiet, then he's going to be pasal, and if the mamzer is quiet, he's going to be kasher. Let's just do the Mishnah. Am Rabbi Yossi, Ma'isa b'tinoka sheyardu l'malos mayim mina ayin v'nansa. There was a girl who went down to get water from the ma'ayan, from the spring, and she was nansa, she was raped. Am Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, imrov anshe ha'ir masin lekahuna harezo tinase lekahuna. So again, we're going to go back to this discussion now of rov versus not rov. If you assume that if most of the ear over there is masin lekahuna. Rashi says kasherin lahasi b'nasayim masin lekahuna. She'eino b'nei ear mina posin isha lekahuna bibiyasan. Most of them are kasherin. So then we have to assume that she was raped by who? By somebody that's from the city who's a rov, and therefore she would still be kasher lekahuna. Shkoyach.